Welcome, everybody, to the CarolinaCast podcast, Season 2, Episode 6. I am Krish Verma, alongside Kalen Patel, as the Panthers are coming off their Week 3 loss to Seattle. We're coming off Week 4 of college football and another great NFL week, which a lot went on. I mean, we had the Dolphins scoring 70 points in a game, the Arizona Cardinals upsetting Kalen's Cowboys, and there's just so much happened in the NFL of this past week. Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift's whole coming out party with the Chiefs demolishing the Bears. But we'll get all of that in just a moment. Once again, I'm Krish Verma alongside Kalen Patel. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. The Carolina Cast is on the road to 2,000 subscribers on YouTube. If you want to check us out on Instagram or TikTok, we are at Carolina Cast Sports. And for Twitter/X, we are Carolina Cast 15. So what is going on, everybody? Kalen, how are you doing? And what do you think about this week of football?
Well, I thought there's some highlights. There was also some really bad moments. I don't really want to talk about what happened to this team right here, but yeah, it was a really good week for football. There was a lot of games, a lot of interesting stuff. I mean, particularly the Dolphins. That was probably one of the best offensive performances I've ever seen in my life.
I mean, yes, certainly the most points ever scored in an NFL game were by the New York Giants way back then when they scored 72 points in the game. The Dolphins scored 70 on the Denver Broncos. And we're going to get to the full NFL in just a moment, but we are going to start with the Panthers game. So if you don't know, the Panthers are now 0-3 on the season after heading to Seattle, heading to the 12th man, home of the 12th man, Lumen Field, and they lose by 10 to the Seahawks, 37-27 final score. I mean, dude, we just could not. We played solid on defense, but the Seahawks had so many field goal attempts. I mean, I'm counting right now. They had 5 field goals in this game. That's already 15 points, and then the touchdowns made everything worse. But I will say this. Andy Dalton threw the football 58 times for Carolina in this game, which I think is way too much. But Dalton, he had a very solid game for a backup quarterback stepping in for the injured Bryce Young, 34 for 58, 361 passing yards, and 2 passing touchdowns. I would like to see Carolina run the football a little bit more because Miles Sanders only had 9 carries for 24 yards and a rushing touchdown. But Kalen, the biggest impact on offense for the Panthers right now is Adam Thielen. He had 11 receptions for 145 yards and a touchdown, and he was really solid for the Panthers on Monday Night Football. I believe he had 7 receptions for 60 yards and a touchdown. So he is their only source of offense so far. We haven't seen enough from Miles Sanders. Obviously, we hope to have Bryce Young in the lineup for Week 4, but that's also up in the air, which I would not mind Andy Dalton starting Week 4. And then the rest of the offense just wasn't really there. DJ Chark did have a really nice touchdown catch in this game. He had 4 receptions for 86 yards and a touchdown. We saw a little bit from Terrace Marshall, 5 receptions for 35 yards. And I mean, very solid. Andy Dalton played well for us, but we could not get it done. What are your thoughts on this game, Kalen?
I mean, he scored 27 points. And when you score 27 points, that's really all you could ask for from this offense, considering how poorly they've been in these first 2 weeks. And I will say, we threw the football way too much. 58 attempts. Dalton only made 34 of those, but he did have a really solid game, like you said, 361 yards, 2 touchdowns. The issue is Geno Smith played better, and the Seahawks offense was rolling. Mentioned the 5 field goals, and they scored 37 points on what we thought was a really good Panthers defense. We said it last week. We think this Panthers defense is going to be really good. Seahawks scored 37 points. Now, granted, we had really good red zone defense. I mean, 5 field goals is better than 5 touchdowns. So that's what I really liked about the Panthers defense. It wasn't enough, especially when your offense is as unproductive as it has been. But I think it's a really high point to score 27 points, considering how poorly we've been moving the football offensively. So that's a big part of it. And another thing I want to mention, Adam Thielen had a great game. My fantasy team loves it. Big reason why I beat Schlesinger this week. Okay, so Adam Thielen, he is doing really well on this Panthers team. He really has settled into that number 1 wide receiver role that we wanted him to go into. So hopefully when Bryce is back, they get that clicking again because yesterday or Sunday they looked really nice.
I mean, Thielen looked great. The offense was rolling. Carolina did not give up a touchdown until the final 4 minutes of the third quarter. They gave up 5 field goals. Prior to that, they were trailing 15-13. And then Kenneth Walker started to stomp all over them. 18 carries for 97 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns for the second-year vet out of Michigan State. Kenneth Walker, incredible halfback. I mean, we weren't going to hold the Seahawks offense for long. They have great weapons at the wide receiver position. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. Geno Smith has been a solid quarterback ever since last season. So I know it looks really bad that we gave up 37 points, but if you really think about it, you take out the field goals, that's 3 touchdowns, that's 21 points. And obviously we got the stops, but we cannot give up 5 field goals in general, because that could mean that, let's say they don't get field goals, they go down and get touchdowns, and this really is a blowout. So the defense does have to perform. Kudos to getting stopped in the red zone and getting the stops we needed. They did get an interception off Geno Smith. It was Deion Jones, who signed, the former Atlanta Pro Bowler, signed with Carolina during training camp. And obviously some positives. One of the negatives coming out for the Carolina Panthers, yet another defensive injury. Week 1, it was J.C. Horn. Week 2, Shaq Thompson. Now week 3, Xavier Woods, our safety, went down in this game and is expected to be out for 4 to 6 weeks. So Carolina's defense takes another tough swallow, third massive injury in a row, and we're only 3 weeks into the season. So we're going to be without those 3 guys. Shaq Thompson will be without for the rest of the season, but J.C. Horn and Xavier Woods for a little bit now, and this team's already struggling, already sitting at bottom of the NFC South. Everyone else is 2-1, so this is not a good spot to be in at all.
And all 3 of those injuries were in the secondary. I guess you should consider Shaq Thompson as a linebacker, but those were 3 secondary solid players. So we really have to see how these third string, fourth string guys step up and play Panthers secondary football, which we know has been good in the past. Hopefully we could just get consecutive good plays on the secondary, because that's where we're gonna have our weak spot. Now we're saying the offense is the weak spot. Now our secondary is the weak spot. So we really need to be able to overcome these injuries and play good football.
So we're gonna move on from Carolina. Obviously, the worries are there, but actually, you know what? I do want to ask you. So with these 3 losses, now we go home. We host Minnesota, which that's already going to be a tough task, because now losing guys in the secondary, we have to defend Justin Jefferson, the best receiver in the NFL, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and it's also a revenge game for Adam Thielen. So now I need to ask you, I mean, how worried and how concerned are you about this Carolina team going into week 4?
I mean, the last 2 weeks, I keep saying, hey, this is a young team. They're going to be able to, they have to be able to develop. And I feel like I keep saying that week in, week out. If they don't perform next week against Minnesota, I'm talking they've got to be within at least 5 points. Then I'm going to have to stop saying that it's a young, developing offense. But they have to score more points. Andy Dalton, if he plays against Minnesota, he has to show his veteran talent, because he is a good quarterback. He's a very good backup quarterback. If you saw him in Dallas, he was able to win a lot of games. And now with Carolina, he had a really good game against Seattle. I think the Carolina Panthers could get their first win against Minnesota. It's all about containing Justin Jefferson. Otherwise, that Minnesota offense could get a little rusty.
Yeah, I mean, it could be really good or really bad. Last time Minnesota traveled to Carolina, they beat the Panthers in overtime. That's when Sam Darnold and company, Christian McCaffrey, was still on that squad about 2 years ago. It was a very close game. But one of the issues they lost the game is because the offense our defense and the Minnesota offense. KJ Osborne had a game-winning touchdown in overtime, and the Vikings scored 34 points that game. So Carolina's defense definitely has to step up. Obviously, they're going to have to eat some of these injuries. I think Jeremy Chin should move back to safety for week 4. That's definitely one thing. Try and fill in that spot for Xavier Woods. We're going to see a lot from our 5th-round pick, Jamie Robinson, out of Florida State, who he's drafted at safety. We're going to see a lot of him on Sunday. I expect to see, obviously, Von Bell, Jeremy Chin, and then Jamie Robinson. I'd like to see him get some reps. For Shaq Thompson, it's going to have to be Frankie Louvu. We might see a little bit from DJ Johnson, our third-round pick. And then for J.C. Horn, it's going to be C.J. Henderson and Dante Jackson for now. It has been for the last 2 weeks. And hopefully one of those guys don't have to take an injury because Dante tore his Achilles last year. He's still trying to, get back into 100% in shape. So a lot of injuries lingering around the Panthers defense. And the biggest one probably on offense is actually definitely the biggest one on offense is Bryce Young. We would like to have him back in the lineup for week 4, Kalen, but we have seen the possibility of him sitting out, which I would not mind. I think Andy Dalton should play week 4 and give Bryce as much time as he can just because of the slow start.
And then Andy Dalton had a better game than Bryce has had all season long. I know he's only played 2 games, but Andy Dalton, he's the veteran. I think you have to play him for as long as you can while Bryce Young fully develops, because you can't have a rookie quarterback go out there play injured, because that'll just get worse. He needs to fully recover before he steps another play on the football field. And Panthers are lucky they have a guy like Andy Dalton.
Yeah, I would definitely consider. You know what? Personally, I can consider Andy Dalton as the best backup quarterback in the NFL. I really think so. We signed him to a solid 2-year, $10 million veteran deal to come mentor Bryce Young. And obviously, 2 games in, he's already injured. It sucks. But this is why we signed a guy like Andy Dalton to step in just in case we're going to need him and to perform and to try and keep our season alive. And obviously, an 0-3 start is never what you want. But if you're Carolina, if you can get a win next week against Minnesota and try and get something going, because the tough part about this is it's not going to get easier. Week 5, we go on the road to play Detroit. Week 6, we go on the road to play Miami, and then it's bye week, and then the schedule gets a little easy. That's why, Kalen, I was mentioning on a few podcasts ago, if Carolina does not win their first 2 games, division games, we might actually start the season 0-6 just from the competition we have to play.
Yeah, that's a very big possibility. And you don't want to go down that hole. You don't want to consistently play poor football and keep losing, because then if I'm Bryce Young on a losing team, I'm like, I want to get out of here. I want to go on a team that knows how to win football games. And you don't want that to happen with your rookie quarterback. You want to stay a competitive team and stay competitive in all your games.
So we are going to recap the NFL in general now. We're going to stay away from the Panthers as their next game will be this Sunday when they take on the Vikings. But let's move on. Let's recap the NFL Week 3. So a lot went on this week. We'll start with Thursday Night Football, where the Niners ran all over the Giants. Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, honestly looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And he's been very solid. He's taken the pressure in very well, and I'm honestly amazed by it. There were some good games this week. The Green Bay comeback against New Orleans. And then, obviously, we saw the Chargers hang on to the Minnesota Vikings because the Chargers went for it on 4th down from, I believe, their own 20-yard line. Did not get it. The Vikings got the ball and had a chance to score a touchdown in the closing seconds. And off of a ricochet, it was Kirk Cousins' pass to TJ Hawkinson was intercepted. So Brandon Staley almost lost his job. He got bailed out, I will say. And once again, a very gutsy play call that you should never do in that situation. And then one of the upsets, Indianapolis came into Baltimore and beat Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. Gardner Minshew got it done for the Colts because Anthony Richardson is still recovering from a concussion injury. They won in overtime 22-19. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce now back in Kansas City. We saw them in Kansas City, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, and Kelce had a great game. He had 69 receiving yards and that touchdown, and the Chiefs just stomped all over the Bears. Now Marcus can't call Justin Fields a generational quarterback anymore. And one of the other biggest surprises, which we'll get to in just a moment, was definitely that Cowboys game. The Steelers hung on to the Raiders on Sunday night. And then Monday night was pretty good too. Joe Burrow and the Bengals finally got a win. I mean, it wasn't pretty, but they got a win. And then the Eagles took care of business against the Buccaneers. So the 2 games I highlighted, which are the 2 ones that are probably very obvious to highlight. Before we go into the Dolphins' performance, Kalen, you're a Cowboys fan, and I will say this. This is a pretty embarrassing loss. And I know I can't really say much as a Panthers fan. We haven't won a game this year. You guys have had 2 great weeks. This was not a game that anyone would expect the Cowboys to lose. But how you should not be that concerned, right? I mean, it's one game, and it's not really going to make that big of a dent on your season.
Well, okay. So I could rant about this for like an hour, but I'll make it short and sweet. You can't expect to win football games allowing 8 yards of carry on defense. I mean, we thought this defense was going to lead our team. They had a terrible football game, still adjusting to the Trayvon Diggs injury. So I just think defensively, we need to show up next week against New England and really show that it was just one game. And yeah, it was just one game. The Cowboys ended up losing a game to a team that they should be beating consistently every single year. Last year, we lost to Jacksonville before they became the Jacksonville Jaguars we know today, and then we lost to Green Bay, which I thought was a very winnable game. 2 years before that, we lost to Denver, and then we lost to Denver again when they were like bottom of the AFC West. So that's just a Cowboys thing to happen. I'm just happy we got it over with early, losing to Arizona. Also, Dak Prescott had one of the worst football games I've ever seen him play. I mean, that last interception, that was awful. I also think the last issue I want to really highlight, Mike McCarthy. We were in the red zone like 5 or 6 times. Every single time we were in the red zone, we ran the football twice and then passed it afterwards. And that just like was chaotic. It never worked. And we kept on doing the same thing over and over again. I just think that Mike McCarthy did a very terrible coaching job. And I think that as a Cowboys fan, my personal opinion is that we're not going to win a Super Bowl under Dak Prescott. I just don't think he's got it in him. Hopefully he proves me wrong, but that's my take as of now.
Which, I mean, I can sort of agree on. I have had the argument that I don't think Dak Prescott is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I've gotten a lot of backlash for it. That was one of my camper takes. My other camper take, though, is that if Tua Tagovailoa stays healthy, the Miami Dolphins are going on a Super Bowl run. And so far, where are all the people that doubted me right now? Because currently, Tua Tagovailoa is number 1 in odds for MVP, and the Miami Dolphins just beat the Denver Broncos 70-20 in one of the most historic defeats in NFL history, with Miami absolutely destroying Denver. 50-point win. Tua went 23 for 26, 309 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns. And listen, before we even get to Raheem Mostert, their starting running back, the rookie Devon Achane had 18 carries for 203 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. And then Mostert had 13 carries for 82 yards, 3 touchdowns. But the greatest part about this, there was no Jalen Waddle, and Tyreek Hill still like 9 receptions, 151 yards, and a touchdown. And Panthers fans, remember Robbie Anderson, now known as Robbie Chosen, 1 reception, 68 yards, and a touchdown. He's back. Raheem Mostert had a receiving touchdown. I mean, this was just a little party. This was just a playing Madden game for the Dolphins. And for the Denver Broncos, this is absolutely embarrassing. This is why Sean Payton should have not come out of retirement to start coaching again. And I also said that at SBC camp. I completely disagree with what the Broncos were doing here. And I don't know what Sean Payton was really thinking. I really thought maybe he's thinking he has a quarterback at a similar size as Drew Brees and has similar talent to him. You know, they're Super Bowl caliber quarterbacks. The Broncos are a mess right now. And the Dolphins, clearly to me, look like the best team in the NFL. But Kalen, I need to ask you, do you think the Dolphins are the best team in the NFL? And do you also think they're bound for a Super Bowl run?
Well, first of all, that game, Dolphins versus Broncos, that's like Alabama playing against my high school team. Like, that was brutal. That was absolutely brutal. 70 points. It was 56-13 when I turned the TV on. Then I go to watch the CarolinaCast stream, and Ryan says, I can't believe the Dolphins have 70 points. And I'm like, what? They scored 2 more touchdowns? And it was absolutely wild. Like, Mike McDaniel was in the stands letting fans call the plays. It was absolutely ridiculous. And Miami, I'm sure they had a really fun time down in Florida. So I think Miami's certainly capable of winning a Super Bowl, having performances like that against a coach like Sean Payton. And the biggest thing for me is Miami has the fastest offense in football history, not NFL history, football history. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, who are probably the two fastest receivers in the NFL to start with. Then you have Raheem Mostert, who's a speed demon. And then the rookie Shane, he's really fast. Everybody's fast. And speed is just key in Miami. And that's why they're running all over the place over every single team they've played so far this season. I love Miami. I think they have a chance at winning the Super Bowl. I completely agree with your camper take.
Well, also going back to right during the NFL draft process, the 2020 NFL draft, prior to Tua Tagovailoa being picked with the 5th overall pick to the Miami Dolphins, there were a lot of Tua haters and doubters just because of that hip injury he had at Alabama and underperforming in college at certain points. Obviously, his story started when he stepped in for Jalen Hurts in the 2017 National Championship game against Georgia. Jalen Hurts was benched. The story of Tua Tagovailoa was created as he stepped into that game and won it for Alabama in overtime. Fast forward to today. I have always been a Tua Tagovailoa believer. I talked about it this entire summer. I've looked at this team. If this guy stays healthy, this team is taking off. And everyone disagreed with me, called it like, oh my goodness, how would you say something like that? It's because of the talent around this dude. And I'm not just going to go out here, go full Brock Purdy mode, because I think Brock Purdy's a good quarterback. And I'm not gonna be that guy that says, well, it's not Brock Purdy's a good quarterback. It's because he has Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and CMC and George Kittle and this great offensive line. I'm not gonna come out here and say that. Does Tua Tagovailoa have better weapons than, let's say, the Carolina Panthers? Absolutely. But he's still throwing them the football. If it was a bad throw, is Tyreek Hill gonna make the catch? No. He's still making the plays. He is calling the plays, pretty much, as a quarterback, and he's making the plays for the offense. And this should not be looked past as this is just Tyreek Hill doing that. This is Tua Tagovailoa helping the Dolphins do this explosive offense, this very underrated defense. This is one of the best teams in the NFL, and I stand as tall as I can on this take right now.
Yeah, completely agree. The Dolphins have been playing really, really good football. I mean, I just went on a rant about it. They are the best, my best team in football right now. I think it's Miami, then San Fran, then your typical Chiefs, Eagles, and then personally, for me, the Cowboys dropped to like 9 or 10 for me. But yeah.
So we're going to move on to our last segment of college football because, man, NFL was interesting, but college football also had some thrillers. We had a game on CarolinaCast this Saturday. Number 4 Florida State traveled to Death Valley to take on the Clemson Tigers. It was a close one, but Jordan Travis and the Noles got it done in overtime. 31-24 being the final score. Jordan Travis with the game-winning touchdown to Keon Coleman, and then Clemson would turn it over on their opportunity. But definitely the best college football game of the week was Ohio State versus Notre Dame. Marvin Harrison Jr., one of the top prospects in the upcoming NFL draft, got injured in this game. And then one of the greatest finishes ever, Ohio State starts driving down the field, and then they have a go-ahead touchdown with 1 second on the clock to knock off Notre Dame 17-14, a big defensive battle. The Buckeyes hung in there and got it done. But the big thing I want to look at here is the change of the rankings. So the top 3 teams stand the same. With Ohio State's win, they knock out Florida State of the top 4. They move down to FSU moves down to 5. Ohio State is back in the college football playoff picture. They're at 4. Oregon got their massive victory over Colorado. So the Buffaloes, they fall out of the top 25. Listen, before we go any further, though, I'm not falling off of the Coach Prime hype train.
No, absolutely not.
I'm not leaving because were they expected to win that football game? Absolutely not. And should they have won that football game? Absolutely not. I'm honestly not surprised at all. Did I really think they were going to lose by that much? Not really. So, obviously, a lot of improvement. we have to think about this too. Did they have Travis Hunter? No, they didn't. They're playing in a brand new environment that Deion Sanders has not coached a team in. And you can practice this as much as you want. In Colorado's practice, they had, all the organ bands and the loud chants and everything going on during their practice sessions. You can do all that you want. But when you step onto Autzen Stadium's football field, you see everybody there. You see Phil Knight, the owner of Nike, who went to Oregon, setting up or getting the guys hype in the pregame. Like, you're not going to just come out there and play great with that intensity of everybody rooting against you. So it's a completely new environment for Deion Sanders and his guys. And Colorado's going to take a few years to be great, but it's definitely a great headline seeing his two sons and Travis Hunter on the same team. I still think Shedeur Sanders is a good quarterback. I was trying to explain on the latest College Game Day that we had is I don't think Shedeur Sanders is Heisman caliber. I think he's a good quarterback. I think Heisman, you're looking at guys like Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jordan Travis, J.J. McCarthy, maybe even Sam Hartman. I'm not really looking at Shedeur Sanders. I mean, obviously, very talented quarterback, but but Colorado plays in the Pac-12, and this is the final season that we're going to see the Pac-12 this stacked. And I don't think Shedeur Sanders is going to perform at the high level that we're expecting him to. I think the expectations are a little bit too high for him. But then at the same time, those expectations can be even higher for a guy like Caleb Williams, which I expect Caleb Williams to continue his terror and to be the number 1 overall pick in next year's draft, depending on which team will have it. And just looking at the rankings in general, next week, Kalen on CarolinaCast, it's Notre Dame, who are 11th in the country, taking on Duke. College Game Day is heading to Durham. I'm excited for that. But what did you think about this week of college football?
Well, obviously, let's start with FSU. I mean, they play in Death Valley. Even if the Clemson has all their second-string players, Death Valley is one of the hardest environments to play in college football. So I do not blame Florida State for just having that narrow win. I mean, they're playing in one of the worst environments in football for the opposing team, and Clemson is still Clemson. The other thing I want to talk about is Colorado. Obviously, in Deion Sanders' words himself, that was an old-fashioned butt kicking. Now, for the Buffaloes, they have to play USC next year, so they might get 2 in a row. And now, after they lose to USC, I think they're going to lose. I think it's going to be another one of these blowout-type games. I really do. I'm not hopping off the train, but I feel like a lot of people are going to start falling off the Coach Prime train just because they have 2 losses against 2 teams that are better than them. So, I think that this Colorado team will make the college football playoff next year when it's a 12 team. I think they're very capable of that. But as of this year, they're playing in a very difficult Pac-12. So can't really blame them for having these tough losses, especially if they're consistently in a row and you don't have your best player in Travis Hunter.
Yeah, I can certainly agree. But for Oregon's standpoint, I mean, we've talked about this being one of the best offenses in college football. After this performance, I mean, Bo Nix and company might have the best offense in college football. I'm a Florida State fan myself. I've tried to prove that it's us, but after only that week 31 point, I know 31 points is a lot, but then one of those was a defensive touchdown. The other one was an overtime touchdown. So after that weak offensive performance against Clemson, I really could not back it up for how good our offense is. And Oregon definitely exceeded my expectations. They have a great offense, ran by we can call a veteran college quarterback, and Bo Nix. He's been around for a while. Now, fun fact, Bo Nix started his collegiate career at Auburn about 4 years ago in his first ever game. He led a comeback for the Tigers against Oregon when their quarterback was Justin Herbert. So Bo Nix is the new Stetson Bennett of college football. Been around for a while, but he's got a very talented team around him. And if there's any team that could sneak into the college football playoff that is around Oregon right now, would be Oregon. Just because of the amount of offensive talent they have. Their defense is still solid. I mean, the Ducks, they can produce some wins this year.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
So we'll have to see more from Oregon. We'll have to see more from other teams. I think one of the cool storylines of this week was Florida. One of Florida's receivers had one of the catches of the year. But other than that, I mean, Charlotte going to play the number 25 team in the country and only losing 22-7 is a pretty big deal. And then we had some other collegiate games around the Carolinas. Wake Forest got upset by Georgia Tech. ECU ran all over Gardner-Webb. Then, even on Friday, NC State beat Virginia 24-21. North Carolina took care of business against Pitt. Duke beat UConn, preparing for that big game on Saturday, which is going to be very interesting. That will be on the CarolinaCast. And that's going to go ahead and wrap up this episode of Season 2, Episode 6. Thank you all for tuning in. Before you click out, though, College Game Day is this Saturday on CarolinaCast. We know we haven't had it for the last 2 weeks. We do apologize. We're going to try our best to have it this Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on the CarolinaCast. Later on Saturday night, number 11 Notre Dame travels to Durham to take on number 17 Duke. That'll be at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on the CarolinaCast. And then the next day on Sunday, the CarolinaCast is debuting their London games as Falcons versus Jaguars will take place on Sunday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern on the CarolinaCast. And then right after that game is week 4 of your Carolina Panthers as they host the Minnesota Vikings.
Got a doubleheader.
So a doubleheader on Sunday and 2 streams on Saturday at separate times. But once again, thank you all so much for tuning in to this podcast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. We are on the road to 2,000 subscribers. If you want to follow us on Instagram or TikTok, we are at CarolinaCast Sports, all undercase. And for Twitter/X, we are CarolinaCast_15. Thank you all so much. I'm Krish Verma alongside Kalen Patel, and we will see you all in our next episode.